I think we all realised this wouldn't be like the other strikes where it was 1 or 2 days. It was going to be a long term.
I think the government of the day had given the Met police from outside the area, free rein to do whatever they wanted.
And Thatcher and her policies had done more damage to industrial Britain than Hitler or the Luftwaffe did in the 5 years of war.
This was Wearside 40 years ago. A dispute which would last for a year was just beginning. The miners' strike. Thousands of workers from the Durham coalfields walked out. They were fighting to protect their pits, their jobs, their communities, amid fears that collieries were facing closure. The weeks that followed saw bitter days. Families feared for their survival amid fuel and money shortages. But what was it like to be at the heart of it?
It wasn't it's never an easy time to take or an easy decision to make to take strike action. We were put in a position, we didn't instigate the strike, we didn't want the strike. We wanted a livelihood, we wanted to protect our communities, our jobs, our families. Those wishes were just taken away from us, or would have been taken away from us. And we had to fight. I was the financial secretary at that time. So I was like an understudy to the Lodge Treasurer. It was one of the 3 Lodge officials.
Well, we knew it was coming. We knew that because it appeared that the government was building up to the miners. We had to go to steel workers and various other smaller unions, and we knew they were going to come for us. We didn't think it would last 12 months.
The feeling at that time was one of fear, one of dread. Will our pit be affected? We'd been assured that ours wasn't. We were one of the super pits at Wearmouth that we're going to be safe. We were going to be safe for the next 100 years, and we were told that by the government. We were told that by the National Coal Board. But there was also that feeling that we needed to support our brothers and fellow miners in other pits, the pits that were under threat, because some of them pits were making a profit. So there was a mixture of feelings leading up to the strike. We knew it was coming. We knew she had a plan. We knew that Thatcher and the government had a plan. They'd had that plan. They'd started that plan since 1974, the end of the 74 strike. Lord Ridley chaired a commission, or chaired a committee to negate the risk of electricity disruption by miners, steel workers, railway workers. And the Ridley plan started in 74, and the end product of that was 84, 85. They needed, at the end of the day, what they wanted to do was crush the trade union movement and the National Union mine workers in particular. In 81, they backed down. There was 4 pits in Durham were threatened. There was other pits in the various areas were threatened. And there was a series of spontaneous strikes took place. Pits came, just walked out. They just walked out. And we were on the verge of a national strike at that point. And Thatcher backed down. They backed down and said, we'll invest more money, we'll withdraw the closure plans. And despite the warnings from some trade union leaders, Scargill, McGatty, Heathfield, were saying, listen, this is a ruse. It's a ruse. They're going to come back. They're not strong enough at the minute. The plans haven't been finalised. They'll come back. Some of the more moderate miners' leaders saw it as a victory, and the lads continued working as normal. And the final trigger was when they announced the closure of Corton Wood. They knew the Yorkshire area had a mandate for strike action in the event of any closure being announced that hadn't been agreed previously with the union. And they announced another list of pit closures, and that was the trigger. And the strike started in March '84. And it was with a heavy heart. It really is. Anybody who embarks on strike action, you're losing money. You've still got bills to pay, you've got rent or mortgages, you've got food to buy, and your kids still need school uniforms and all the rest of it. And it's never an easy decision. Never is. despite what the national press tried to portray, that we'll just strike happy, and nobody wants that. We were left with no alternative.
Were you confident of success when you started?
In the early days, yes, because we'd been successful in 74 and 78, and I think that's the reason why the government was so vindictive. The fight was as basic as to protect jobs. We weren't looking for a wage rise, we simply looked to protect jobs and defend our communities. And the way that this particular community was pretty much dependent on coal mining. 1,000 men earning between £150 a week, and that money was coming in the community each week.
Yeah.
We lost that very, very quickly.
Yeah.
We came out right at the beginning at Everton, and we started picketing some of the open cast sites at the time that was going around in Durham, up with Tower Law and around Bishop Auckland Weir. And while I was away picketing, my wife Juliana was at home with the kids.
And I mean, I had a young family, but these were young girls with young families. But they stayed loyal. I think the thing with the support group and the women that were in it, because we were all in the same boat, the friendship and they could come and talk to us freely, and vice versa. What's troubling you today? Oh, I'm getting the electric bill in, I'm getting this in. But we were there to help, and we had, I mean, the miners I've got to say, the NUM and the Durham mechanics, they helped a lot of families that was really struggling.
We had a young family coming, and it was a case of trying to keep that going, but also getting coal for the fire. Because we soon run out of coal, and everybody had a coal fire in those days, and it was no different. So after picketing, I would be up on the pit heap, riddling the waste on the pit heap to get the coal out of it, and I'd bring that back home, and that would be the fire for the next few days.
The support we got from the wider community was absolutely amazing. As an example, at that time we still had shipyards in Sunderland, and Austin and Pickers Guilds and British shipbuilders had gate collections and donated that money, and all that money went to the Miners' Wives Support Group to buy food and stuff. Didn't finance the picketing or anything like that. Rolls-Royce did the same. There was lots and lots of people, pensioners coming in here once a week when they cashed the pension to give us a couple of quid towards the strike fund.
When it was the first meeting we had, it was Florence and me went to SEAM. It was Save Easing Area Mines, and it was to meet them to see how they were starting their kitchens up. And we went there, we got a lot of information, and so what we did, we had an initial meeting down at the old welfare, and we got volunteers to help us start the kitchen. But Florence was a Tyne Weir councillor, and she says, right, we're going to have a support group, but I want it run properly. So what she said, we have to have a chair, vice chair, treasurer. So we had that from the start. I don't think many support groups did, but with her expertise, we always ran it like as an official support group. But when Florence, I and Heather went to welfare, the union meeting was on, we were told to wait outside, and we sat on the stairs till they were finished talking, and then a NUM official came out and I says, right, it was Florence. We want to do a kitchen and other things, and we want the backing of the NUM. Initially, I think they were a bit wary about it. Well, what does women want to get involved for? I think we all realised this wouldn't be like the other strikes where it was 1 or 2 days. It was going to be a long term.
Without the women, we couldn't have endured 12 months. We couldn't have lasted 12 months. They did an absolutely fantastic job. And these, by and large, were women who had never sported public meetings, they'd never stood in front of a crowd talking to people before. They were the wives, girlfriends, mothers, sisters, aunts of miners, and in some cases of other people. and they banded together and they showed their organisational skills. And by God, they were a formidable bunch.
There were grandmas. We grandmas now, but these were miners, grandmas.
Yeah.
They did the cooking. It was mince and dumplings, it was broth, it was everyday food that you would get at home.
And this was it every day of the week?
Every day.
And how many were you cooking for?
Oh. Well, sometimes there were 2 and 3 sittings.
Yeah.
So it could be the hundreds. And this was happening all the time. Well, what happened as well is the children were getting free meals at school. Then it ended up, some children weren't having the free school meals. They were coming to welfare at dinner time, and we were feeding them as well. But there were families coming down. But my role was, we found out that the single miners did not receive anything. And some of these single miners were the main wage earners in that house. So there was me and Jean Lamb, we were volunteered to do food parcels. So we got the welfare to give us permission to go to the cash and carries. We would do food parcels every week of the strike to single miners, and hardship parcels as well when we found out. So that was our role. I wasn't involved in the kitchen, but we were up and down we were downstairs in a little back room doing the parcels, and they were doing the meals upstairs. But what
was in the parcels?
Right, we did basics: eggs, potatoes, beans, probably a tin meats, and we used to try and vary them, but there were basics that you knew that you could use every day. If the lads didn't come and pick them up, we would actually, get them to them.
You were there most of the time doing the picketing. What do you remember about that part of it, sort of being outside the pits, making your point, and presumably as it went on, perhaps a bit more bitter?
It became very bitter. There was a point where the local police, Northumbria police, were pretty much replaced by Met police. They were particularly violent and nasty, really nasty. And at that point it was, it got quite serious.
Why do you think that was?
I think the government of the day had given the Met police from outside the area free rein to do whatever they wanted.
I remember the picket lines in some cases being very, very violent. I remember them being, at first, at the very beginning, it was joyful enough. It was the local copper who would be standing there watching you, and you'd be on your picket line. There wasn't anything going on really, and it was quite cordial. And then as time went on, that mood changed, and you saw police being drafted in from places like Leicester, from the Met and things like that, and it changed. It became a lot more sinister, a lot more violent, a lot more authoritarian. It was a police state, there's no doubt about that. And the forces of the British state came out to the maximum to defeat the miners.
An example of that is Orgreave. Orgreave was, when we arrived there, it was set out like a Napoleonic battlefield. I'm convinced it was a trap. We were held back in Sheffield for 2 hours before they allowed us to go to Orgreave. This is coaches of men. And then when we got there, it was just set out for a battle. Police on horseback and dogs, and that thousands of police. And the video evidence was all there. And the big men who were in jeans and t-shirts.
It's a big loss to the shops locally, and the other businesses that comes along with that, with families, and it was all the debt that you had as well, because people bought cars, televisions, videos at the time were all on HP. So quite often they would be landed with a bailiff or somebody knocking at the door wanting money. But we personally did. We wrote to everybody who we owed money to and told them that there was no more money until I started work. and I've got to say, none of them ever bothered us during the strike. Some of them had bad reputations now. The Provi just stopped it and then restarted it when we went back to work after 12 months. It didn't have anything on, and neither did our bank, the NatWest at the time. And it was like a big, it was like a big thank you for them at the end of the strike, because a lot of lads had the televisions and videos confiscated.
We got donations from all over. I've got donations, all the unions would drop things in. What got me is one day we had this man come knocking in, and it was from the power stations, and he popped a cheque in, and that used to happen all the time. It's and people would just pop in £10, £20, and these were other people living in Hetton. But a lot of the unions sent them to the support group. They didn't go sort of to the unions, they came directly to the sport. We had, cheques for £100, cheques for 20, and it's surprising how many. And I've been having a look at some of my things, and it's surprising how it mounted up. Our butchers, sadly the butchers no longer, would get the meat a bit cheaper. And on a Friday, when it was fish and chips or whatever it was, something with chips, the local fish shop did the chips for us, and the trays were carried across to the welfare.
Do you think it was a community that realised this was going to be an important issue that defined that era?
I really did, because every other person worked at the pit round here. It was the main employer, apart from Pearson's, the builders. But everybody, all along these streets where I live now, I would say every other house, the lad who lived next door to me was single, and that was his income. Another one round in the corner, he was very shy, wouldn't come down to welfare at all. And Bob persuaded him to come down, and he came every day after that. It was just, he kept himself to himself, he went to work, he went home. So, I think because we're a community, and we've always been a community, you know everybody.
Someone they didn't know personally, who helped out, was none other than Bruce Springsteen.
I was at Durham, in the mechanics office, and Anne Suddick, I've got to say, she was absolutely phenomenal, Anne. And she says, Bruce Springsteen has been in touch with the Durham area support groups, and he wants to invite some women down to his concert at St James's Park. And when we went there, seats were great, right near the, you could see him and everything. And I've got to admit, I knew about Bruce Springsteen, but I didn't actually, knew his music. But then they were asked to meet him backstage, and he handed the cheque. And we couldn't, $10,000.
Really?
And he did one for us and one for Northumberland. And you don't think somebody who's living in America, got a very good career, would do something like that. But it's surprising how many celebrities actually did support the miners.
Yeah.
I've become very good friends with Mike Elliott locally. Paul Weller, he's another one. Alan Hull as well. I mean, one day I was sitting in a Durham mechanics office. There was Anne Suddick, me, Mike Elliott, Linda's Forbes sitting there, he's there, and I'm sitting and looking around, and I thought, what am I doing in here?
And it was a really difficult time for everybody. Yeah. It wasn't just the pickets. Oh, I had a lovely time. I hadn't tell you, it wasn't a lovely time. Yeah. It was quite horrendous at times, and very emotional. I'll put it that way.
How long would you be picketing for per session?
The open casts were open for 8 hours, and we would land there probably before they started, and we would be there for most of the day, trying to talk the wagon drivers not to go in. But you had few and far between successes, and some of the operators, they would tell us, if you come there, our wagons will turn away. If you're not there, our wagons will go in. So at those places, we always made sure there was at least half a dozen lads there. And their wagons invariably would do that. And it was mainly in the west of Durham where we got that sort of support from the quarry owners.
It got more challenging as time went on, because it becomes part of the norm. There was still a hell of a lot of support from rank and file people, from the ordinary people in the street. There was still support, because I think lots of them realised the implications of these pits closing. The downside to that was, and the negative side was, that some people were duped into believing the likes of Weymouth was safe. So we can't to work. You've got plenty of time to work. We knew that was untrue. We knew that was untrue. They didn't want the Durham coalfield. They didn't want the Scotland coalfield. They didn't want the South Wales coalfield or the Kent coalfield. They wanted to concentrate production in the super pits in the Midlands and parts of Yorkshire, and that would be the end of it. It was a lot worse at the end of the day than we envisaged. We thought we'd have some pits left. We haven't got any left now.
There's lots of families were driven to absolute desperation. In the end, some lads went back to work a week or two before the end of the strike. It wasn't because they disagreed with the strike, it was desperation. They had to feed the families, the homes were at risk, and I think their actions should be understood.
I didn't think you realise the full extent at the time when you're living through it. It's when you've got time to reflect on it. We knew it was important, because we knew we were fighting for our lives. We were fighting for our lives, we were fighting for our jobs, for our communities, for our families, for a whole way of life. We knew that. I knew that very, very well. I knew they intended to destroy it. But the argument that I heard it time and time again, it was in the press, it was on the television, on the radio, so they're just hell-bent on bringing the government down. That was never the intention. If that had been a consequence of us winning, which I suspect it may well have been, I would have welcomed that. But that wasn't the reason we were on strike. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about pay and conditions. It was about the future of a whole industry. And I think as times went on, our position has been vindicated. I fully supported the strike. And everything that went on there, I support that. I supported, striking miners. I was one of them. Joined the picket. I was on the picket lines with them. Went to jail with them. Got arrested with them, and so we did all that. And it was a bitter pill to swallow when we walked back. I just felt dejected that we hadn't went back on our terms. We did. We went back on our terms, but it wasn't a victory. It wasn't a victory. I suppose we can claim a moral victory now. We can claim, the moral high ground, because we're proven to be right. Everything was said, everything the union said was proven to be correct. We've said, but on the day we went back to work, wasn't a happy bunny. It was over with. Didn't feel that we'd achieved our aims and objectives that we started off with 12 months previously. But there was a great camaraderie.
As I got towards the end, it was really hard. And winter was coming, in again. I think we realised probably the week before they went back, things was going to happen. And sadly, we knew one lad who went back the day before the strike was called off. It's hard, because he would be classed as the same as any other returning miner, It was hard, but we also, the first miner that crossed the picket line up at Eppleton actually didn't come from Hetton. He came from Brandon. He was one of the travelling miners. And there was quite a few went back, but not the majority went back.
In my own mind, I knew the fight wasn't over. It was just, we were going to be back at work. and there would be a struggle because we knew the plans were to close all the pits down.
Once Thatcher would claim a victory over the miners, we knew it was the beginning of the end for certainly in some of the areas, that it was the beginning of the end of the coal industry. And they started straight away. There was pits, Harrington went straight away, and there was the likes of Sacriston, and then they were just boom, 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 pit after pit after pit after pit being closed. They put a colliery review procedure in place where it would appeal the decision. The pits that went through that, even if they got a successful outcome, they still closed the pits. It was an exercise, that was a sham, an absolute sham. Within 30 years, there wasn't a pit left.
It was mixed emotions, but the thing is, we weren't just, yes, we're fighting to save the pit, and we carried on fighting because Epplin was one of the ones that was, due for closure. We were fighting for a community. We weren't just fighting for the pit, we were fighting for a community, because at the time where the strike was finishing, there was rumours going round, there was another Pearson's the Builders. There, when our pit closed, Pearson's went into liquidation and they're closed. So there was 2 major employees of Hetton went just like that, but nothing put in its place.
It was 8 years, 8.5 years, and Weymouth was gone. Making a profit, 170 odd million tonnes sterilised under the North Sea, a ready market for the coal. It was good coal, good quality coal, that they incidentally used to use it to send down to Selby to sweeten their coal, to give their coal a higher calorific value. Wasn't any reason on earth to close it, none at all. It was just pure vindictiveness. Last coal field last coal mine in the Durham coalfield, and that was an absolute tragedy. And they didn't waste much time in blowing the towers down. We're not going to have any reminders of our industrial past. They did the same when they closed the shipyards, dynamited it, blew it all up. Didn't want any trace of that. And I still maintain that the closure of Weymouth, and then the closure of we'd had the closure of the shipyards about 4 years before that on the Weir. Thatcher and her policies had done more damage to industrial Britain than Hitler or the Luftwaffe did in the 5 years of war. They absolutely devastated these communities.
It almost, now when I look back at it, it feels like we were prophets. We knew what was going to happen, but we failed to stop it happening. It's a little bit like saying it's going to rain tomorrow. You may be right, but yet we're not going to stop it raining. And so we were right in everything we predicted would happen. And the government of the day, Thatcher, was lying to the British public. She was saying, no, there's not going to be any mass closures of pit, and they threw 150,000 men out of work in a decade.
My point of view is that the place started to decline. There was no work, so a lot of the young people moved out. There was leaving empty houses, colliery houses, a lot of colliery houses here in Hetton. We moved into one because we couldn't afford the council rent with the debt that we'd built up through the strike. And we moved into a colliery house because the rent was 7 and 6 in the old days. That was the rent for the week, and there wasn't any central heating in the house, but there was a big fire and a triplex oven. So it was one of these things where people moved out. People that were coming in from the landlords or from outsiders. Many of them had social problems, to put it that way. And gradually it all downloaded, and then drugs came onto the scene, and house break-ins and everything else that was happening. I went to Europe, to the European Parliament. It was a meeting of coal-fired areas when I was a councillor. It would be the late 90s. to see what we could do around Europe about the coal mining communities because of the implosion of the coal-powered fire stations all closing down right across the world. And we heard from Russia, Ukraine, France, Germany, Belgium. I think it was Belgium. Was it Belgium or Holland had collieries, and all of them had the same story. We thought we were unique here, where all these colliery villages were just dying on their feet. It was across the whole of Europe, and I was like taken back by it all.
There was people committing suicide, there was all kinds of hardship, there was unimaginable hardship in some cases. And that was hard, because you still saw people paying debts off years and years later.
Looking back, do you think you were right in the actions that you took?
I don't think we could have done anything else. I really don't. And if we hadn't, it would have happened over a shorter period of time.
Because, of course, I think Harrington and others were on the short list.
Yeah, Evelyn lasted a year after the strike. Yeah, it was gone. And it's worth mentioning, before the strike, most pits lost about a third of the workforce long before the strikes. Typically, a pit would have 1,500 men. That went down to, Evelyn went down to 1,000 men. So the figures, even 150,000 men who lost their jobs, if you include them, those jobs that were lost while they were running the pits down.
Have the communities like Eppleton really recovered since then, 40 years on?
No, I don't think so. I think if you look at the town centre, the shops we've lost, the clubs we've lost, the pubs we've lost, the banks we've lost, and giving an indication that the health of the local economy. We don't have a bank, but we have 2 betting shops, which is usually an indication of a failing economy. When you don't have a bank, we have betting shops. Personally, I think, regardless of whether you believe in the strike or not, I always think it was a massive waste of people's lives. One of the characteristics most miners have is their ability to overcome nature and difficulties. Those skills would have been directly transferable into major projects, road building, rail building, infrastructure projects, and the government chose just to throw people on the scrap heap. No help whatsoever after the strike. Nothing, just everything ended. Miners will always accept pit closures. Always. I mean, you just run out of coal. We have 300 million years worth of coal in the UK. Pits, there would have been different pits and we could have gone on. The government chose to go for the dash for gas, which ultimately is failing, it's causing problems now. We had energy security, and now we don't. Now we're paying the price for it. I think the whole world's realising, and the whole country's realising now, we've gone backwards. We've really gone backwards. When I left school, I got what we were told was a job for life. When I needed a house, or when people needed a house or a home, you would put your name down for either a colliery house or a council house. And within weeks you would get that. And then there were decent quality homes. Today, a young person leaving school, get a job at Costa, can't afford a mortgage, can't afford to go to university. It's not a better place. It's not a better place. Our young people have lost hope. There's no hope, which I just think that's the shame of it all.
Once the colliery went, we knew that there would be a problem with employment. That has its own social impact on everybody in the area, whether you're working or not. There's a social impact for them to pay, because we all live here in the same community. The impact of closing everywhere down was crazy. All I had to do was to get some other sort of investment jobs into those villages or near the villages where they could travel to in order to keep the community afloat.
It never happened.
It never happened. I mean, with a closed out colliery, moved the workforce to Merton, they closed Merton and they moved that workforce to Vane Tempest, and that was going on all the time. But there was nothing coming in to replace all those jobs. There was 1,000 jobs lost at the colliery. There must have been 500 lost at when Pearson's the Builders in Hetton closed. That was 1,500 jobs gone out of our area. What's the cost of that?
Indeed.
What's the cost of that? And the social cost is even bigger.